Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Two Southwestern Illinois Congressmen have called it quits and are not seeking re-election to the U.S. House of Representatives. They are Jerry Costello and Tim Johnson. This March, Mr. Johnson ran in the Republican primary seeking a 7th term. He won that primary and 2 weeks later quit the race, stating that he wanted to spend more time with his family. Our guest today is John Hartman of Edwardsville, who filed petitions in June as an independent candidate for the U.S. House seat, which is being vacated by Mr. Johnson. He will appear on the November ballot along with Democrat David Gill and Republican Rodney Davis. Mr. Hartman has a degree in business administration from Washington University and a Master's of Arts in teaching from Johns Hopkins University. He is currently the Chief Financial Officer of DNA Polymerase Technology Inc., a St. Louis company. John Hartman, welcome to Conversation. Sorry for messing that up. Say the name of your company correctly. You just told me and I screwed it up.
Oh, that's okay. It's hard to say. DNA Polymerase Technology.
Polymerase. Couldn't get it. Sorry.
Okay.
So now that I've embarrassed myself in front of the whole world, now we're going to make you look like a champ here.
Okay.
You're doing something serious now. This Congressman Johnson, who for some reason would have been the congressman representing Edwardsville and Glen-Carbon, I guess this is due to the redistricting, he ran for the Republican nomination, won it, and then pulled out like 2 weeks later. First of all, what do you make of that? Do you know anything more than what the news accounts are?
I do not know.
Have you ever met this man?
I have not met him.
Okay. And then in June, which would have been just a couple months later, suddenly you got the itch to be the replacement congressman.
Well, actually, my interest was well before that. I determined my website of Hartman2012.com back in September, October. So I determined to run in the fall of 2011. And it had nothing to do with what the Democratic Party or the Republican Party was going to do.
Okay, so let's start from there. What was your thinking? What brought you to the conclusion that you wanted to be a member of the U.S. House of Representatives?
I care deeply about the problems we have in this nation, and I feel I can do something about them. I think the House of Representatives is a forum for addressing the problems. So that's where I'm putting my effort. I'm trying to do as much good as I can, and we need it. We need leadership desperately in this country, and I can't just sit on my couch and let this go by.
Now, a lot of people use the word problems, or and to each individual they have their own thought process as to what they mean when they say problems. So I want you to define to the audience, when you say the word "we have problems," what is it you're thinking?
The challenges that are the big challenges facing this nation.
I mean, specifically, what?
Well, they are the budget deficit.
Okay.
The environment and our energy policies. They are our healthcare system. We have foreign policy challenges. So they are on the top of my list.
Deficit. Well, that seems to be probably the largest problem that the United States faces, at least in the minds of many, many people, including myself. So what would you, first of all, from your perspective, how did we get into this mess? And from your perspective, what would you propose in order to change that direction?
Well, how did we get into this mess? It's good to start in the 1990s, when the first President Bush recognized that we were having serious deficit problems and decided to raise taxes, knowing that that was going to jeopardize his re-election chances. But he did it because he thought it was the right thing. We had further responsible legislation in 1993 and 1997 that put us on a path to get balanced in 1999 and 2000. And an important component of that was the pay-as-you-go legislation. So if you introduced a new bill, the bill in itself, in the language of the bill, would say how you were going to pay for it, either by cutting another program or raising taxes. So we had that, and we had it done, and we had broad consensus in the United States that we were finally where we need to be on our fiscal policies.
Okay.
Then we had
what happened?
Well, we lost the pay-as-you-go responsibility and discipline, and 9/11, of course, sent our spending on defense and security measures much higher. At the same time, 9/11 pushed back the airline industry. We had economic diminishment, and the Bush administration felt that the correct response to that was a large tax break, known as the Bush tax cuts, and so we lost revenue, and we increased spending, and now we've had 4 consecutive years of $1 trillion deficits.
Okay, so that's how we got here.
That's right.
Now you're sitting in the Johnson seat in Congress. Now, Congressman Hartman, what are we doing?
Well, actually, if we don't do anything, we'll improve our deficit greatly. The Congressional Budget Office says we will go from a $1 trillion deficit in 2013 to about half of that. Now, the problem with that fiscal cliff policies are that when you have, that's going to be basically reviewed as an austerity measure. We're going to have increased taxes, and we're going to have decreased spending.
Now, there's a lot of people that may be listening to this that don't fully understand what you mean by why all of a sudden we're getting more revenue and why the deficit's going down. So we ought to cover that that the law that lowered tax rates is set to expire on December 31st, 2012, right?
Yes.
Okay, so go from there.
Well, it was intended to be a temporary law. If we don't do anything, we'll let the law run its course. The legal rates will go back to where they were when we had a balanced budget. So in 1999 and 2000, we were taxing about 20% of our GDP, and we had a balanced budget. Now we're taxing 15% of our GDP, and we're way in the hole. So we'll go back to the rates that we had when everybody was happy and thought we had things organized. Now there's an important component to this about austerity, because we've learned a few things about that. In 1937, we were coming out of the recession, and FDR, at Republican urging, decided that we needed to stop being in such deficit after the spending was so important to get us out of the hole of the deep recession, and they put the brakes on too much, and they raised revenue and cut spending, and it sent our economy worse, because all of a sudden the government wasn't spending and injecting money into employment. And so in addition to that, we have recent consequences of austerity measures in Europe, including especially the United Kingdom. And you don't want to send yourself into a recession. So, and but the Congressional Budget Office is suggesting that we are going to have a short recession anyway if these policies, if we don't do anything. So I would think it would be reasonable to enact new legislation, let the fiscal cliff policies run their course, and then enact new legislation on a pay-as-you-go basis, that we have a stimulus, a short stimulus, such as a 2% payroll tax cut, a new one. But in the same legislation, put in either that we're going to cut spending in the next, say, 6 to 8 years, or pay it back in increased taxes in the next 6 to 8 years.
The monies that you're talking about.
So we'll have a short-term stimulus.
You're talking about paying back the payroll tax
Yeah,
cuts?
because it's going to send us in the hole when you cut taxes.
Yeah, I was going to say that the payroll tax cuts that we've just went through Well, there seems to be concern about both Social Security and Medicare and their fiscal health. Those cuts that we've just gone through and the ones that you just described starve the systems of money.
That's right.
Right. So all of a
That's
sudden,
right.
you're just, the politicians who have already, we're all excited about payroll tax cuts. I don't think the public really realizes what that means in the long run in terms of being able to pay the bills both of Medicare and Social Security.
You're exactly right, and that's why I said the same legislation of the tax cut must include the way to pay for it. Right. And that would be increased taxes in out years, because what we're saying is that we cannot send our economy into an intentional recession, because then you're like killing the goose that lays the golden egg in the private sector, and we can't have that.
Now you're a private sector guy.
Yep.
Right. Do you think that raising, which taxes are we talking about in your opinion? Are we raising? Are we raising them on corporations at the corporate level, or are we raising money, taxes on money that has already been dispersed past the corporation to individuals?
I'm not sure I understood the question. The taxes, but your first part of your question was which taxes am I talking about?
Yes.
And they are the Bush tax cuts. Those are income tax
No, yes, and but are we talking later on about raising more tax? Are you talking about raising more taxes, or you're talking about just going back to what was the law during the Clinton administration? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm afraid I don't understand your point. Your question.
The law that's going to expire. Okay. Changed the law as it existed during the Clinton administration. There were a certain tax level during the Clinton administration.
Yes.
The Bush tax cuts cut into that and lowered those rates. When they expire, then we're automatically going back to the rates as they existed during the Clinton administration. Do you have any thoughts about whether that is enough, that the amount of money being taxed at that level is enough, or do you see that we're going, because we're in such a hole, that we're going to need to collect more taxes than even during the Clinton administration?
Okay, yes, now I understand.
Okay.
They are a very good first step to just let the Bush tax cuts expire. Like I said, the CBO said that that'll get us about half of the way if we allow the fiscal cliff policies to go. The problem with the fiscal cliff policies, and again, it's not a question. You're saying I'm in Congress, so the choices are not the ideal world. The problem with the fiscal cliff policies is they leave the entitlements completely alone.
Well, that's true.
But the good thing about the fiscal cliff policies is they represent an agreement that has already taken place between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. It's enacted law. And the major problem driving our deficits is the two parties can't agree with each other. But now they're kind of stuck with what they've already done. And so we should take the agreement that we have because I think it's progress.
Now, you said that the next thing, well, you just mentioned the word entitlements. So let's just cover that. What is your thinking about the entitlements that have become law over the last, well, since the 1930s to the current date?
Well, I think they've proven themselves to the broad section of American people to be valuable to us. We're glad to have Social Security. We're glad to have Medicare. We need to strengthen them. We're taking more money out than we're putting in to both of those programs. So the solution is not that complicated. We need to put more money in and take less money out to get back on a trajectory. If we believe in those programs, and I do, and I believe the American people do. So to take less money out, we're going to have to extend the ages that we are become eligible to them gradually. And as far as putting money in, I think for the Social Security program, right now we are capping the amount of pay at $110,100 that the employer matches the employee. And I think we can keep the cap on the employee, but raise it on the employer.
I see. Okay.
To add revenue, because more money has to go in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we believe in Social Security.
Right. And then, of course, Medicare is a part of the FICA taxes.
Yes.
And so this would add to the Medicare fund as well. Is it?
Yes, it would.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Now you mentioned when you were talking about the issues of interest, you mentioned health care as well. So why don't, this would be an excellent time for you just to discuss your thinking about health care and the federal government and the American people.
Well, your show is way too short to really give well, health care is a huge issue.
Yes.
We have some realizing to do in this nation and the world. A pioneer back on the Illinois prairie that had appendicitis, that was just too bad. You're going to suffer or die from your appendicitis. In 1950, the prescription for heart disease in the United States was bed rest. I mention those two examples because those two folks back in the prairie days in 1950, not a huge percentage of their income was going to health care. Because bed rest and just being too bad doesn't really cramp in on what you want to spend on your house or your clothes or your transportation. Now it's cramping in on us. And no one wants to have a broken leg or a liver problem, but now we have solutions to those. But that money has got to come from somewhere. And so the money that we used to be able to be comfortably spending on other things, we're forced to, if we're going to take advantage of the technology, pay for it. And we don't like that. We like to be able to get cured, but the money's got to come out of us. And this is true even from the more efficient systems of the world. Japan, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, Canada, all those countries are providing insurance to all of their citizens, and they're doing it at a much less cost than we are, but they still have this problem that they're complaining too, because now more of their percentage has to go to healthcare than it used to, and that money it's crowding out other things. In our government's case, it's crowding out it's going to crowd out other programs if we're going to keep our taxes somewhat reasonable. So it's a problem. I mentioned health insurance, that other companies cover all of their citizens. It's really not contested that if you do not have health insurance in the United States, you live your life sicker and you die younger. And if other countries have found a way to provide health insurance for all their citizens, and they can do it at less expense than we have, it's our responsibility to learn from them and to put those best practices into practice here.
Now, it sounds like you've really done some thinking on this subject. What is it that your studies have shown that these other countries are doing that the United States is doing differently or wrongly?
Mainly it has to do with the way the funds are handled on the top, health insurance in particular. They all handle it differently. I mean, Britain has, their employees, the doctors in the hospitals are employees of the government. In Japan and Germany, they're private. But the government is strongly involved in the funding and the insurance of it. In Switzerland, the employers are not involved in the paying in, but in Germany they are, and in Japan they are. So they're all different, but and of course Canada has a single payer system, whereas Germany and Japan have nonprofits, private nonprofits running their health insurance. So Medicare takes about 3.5 cents of every dollar that it processes. Private health insurance, they're in the business of making money and getting money into their accounts. They're running about 11 cents of every dollar they process, whereas the Canadian system, they take about 2.7 cents of every dollar they process.
The Affordable Care Act, which was passed by the United States Congress, signed by President Obama, will make some significant changes to the American healthcare system. Are these changes good or bad? And I'm not going to ask you good or bad in a vacuum, but good or bad compared to what these other countries that you've looked at, what they're doing. Do you think that it's going to get us on this trajectory which will make healthcare more affordable?
Well, we have two objectives. One I've talked about, and that is getting people covered. We currently have about 45 million Americans that do not have health insurance. despite the wealth of this country. The Affordable Care Act will cover about 32 million people. So I do not favor repealing the Affordable Care Act for that achievement. And the other huge piece of the problem is cost. We pay so much. We have a fee-for-service system here where we feel comfortable. We're used to going into a hospital or a doctor's office, especially if we have insurance covered by our employer, and we say, just give me everything that you need. I'm not paying for it. My insurance company is paying for it. The doctor has no incentive not to, and we have runaway costs. So we've got to get a handle on that. So, and the Affordable Care Act makes some headway, at least in trying to learn from best practices, but it's not enough. We have situations where in some parts of the United States, a great deal of testing is done, a great deal of money is spent on the patients, and then we have other sections of the United States where it's not that way. And when you compare the health outcomes of the two, they're roughly similar. The people in the high paying areas don't live any longer, aren't any healthier than the people in the lower paying areas.
Yes, yeah. And I too have also looked at this system, and while my opinion is of little consequence here, I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to express your thinking on this matter. You also mentioned environmental concerns that you had, and I believe we probably have, I don't know, about maybe like 7-8 minutes left of the program, so let's cover that area as well.
Primarily, I am concerned with climate change. I accept the data coming out of the National Science Foundation, the National Academy of Sciences, NASA, NOAA, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We know from air bubbles and ice that's been around for up to 700,000 years that the level of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere was never over 300 parts per million by volume up until the Industrial Revolution, when it was about 278. And now we're over 390. And the folks that study this say that we need to get back down to about 350. And there are very serious consequences of this. And you know, I think ethics and responsibility to each other now, and especially to the billions of people that are going to be coming after us on this planet, if we're damaging the environment, we need to change our ways. And so we need to stop causing the problem.
What can the United States Congress do to have an impact on these changes that you would like to see?
Well, the House passed a cap and trade bill early in the Obama administration.
Why don't you explain to people who've heard that term but really don't know what it is that is meant by that term?
A cap is, well, we will have our scientists be as objective as possible and tell us what levels of CO2 we can put into the environment. And then we cap it, and the cap can even decrease over time. So we don't need to shock ourselves, as you were talking about with the budget deficit earlier. But we need to let people know that we need to be emitting less. And if you emit more, then you need to pay for that. You will pay for that. If you happen to be very efficient about it, in, let's say, the utilities industry, which is a large contributor to emissions, then you can sell or trade the efficiency that because you're producing your electricity for much less than what's allowed, so you can trade that to others that are over it, so that the overall utility manufacturers in the United States are in compliance. Or if we can't get that, I would favor a direct tax on emissions.
And what would that look like? Or do you have a thought on that? Or that's just something you're saying here?
No, I believe that we need to at least go back to the 1993 level of gasoline tax, because gasoline tax is not indexed to inflation, and we have transportation issues, infrastructure needs and we can't fund the same. We can fund about half of what we could fund in 1993 because of inflation. So the right thing to do is to start to change our behavior, and higher taxes on gasoline would start to do that. People would start riding with each other, taking the bus, riding their bicycle, living closer to work. Those are the things that we need to do. We need to stop but mainly buying more efficient vehicles. We need to stop. We need to change our behavior and stop putting less emissions. If that's the responsible, and that is the responsible thing that we need to do.
So in the last couple of minutes that we have here, would you favor the United States government putting money into more research in these areas, battery technology, solar cell technology, et cetera, what is now considered the leading edge of cleaner energy?
Well, you were right earlier that I am a free market person. I'm a business-oriented person. So I do not think that the federal government needs to be selecting or guessing what the efficient technologies are going to be. We don't have a very good record of doing that. I think the market should do that. We should tax the things, make the things that are harmful expensive, and then let the market and the entrepreneurs be efficient. And as long as you come up with technologies that will be under the cap or be more efficient. The other part of, we really can't talk about climate change without talking about international cooperation, where it would be naive not to do that. Only thing we can do is recognize that other countries have democracies with people, and if we can put the facts before them, and they have their own populations that believe this, we're not the only ones who think this. Put pressure on the government, saying that's the right thing to do, and believe in democracy, and that people we can get this accomplished.
The Chinese government is putting a whole lot of coal-fired plants online. I mean, every month.
Yep.
I imagine you're thinking that we need to negotiate with them?
Absolutely. I think the Chinese society will be evolving as well. And I think that the global relations and the information age, that we're all joining into a closer knit family here, and that the Chinese people will, if the Communist Party is not going to stop the production of their coal-fired plants, that the Chinese people, hopefully, we can convince them to take a more responsible approach for future generations.
Yes, that would be, I would hope that would be the case, since the Chinese seem to be the most active in the area of manufacture.
Yeah.
That's about the time we got. We covered quite a bit of territory. I'm very glad that you found the time to come and spend with us today, and I hope that the audience enjoyed what you had to say. Thank you very much.
Nice talking to you, Lee.
And to my audience, I've been speaking with John Hartman. He's an independent candidate for the United States Congress in the Illinois 13th District, which includes a little sliver here in Madison County of Edwardsville and Glen Carbon, and then more to the north and then to the east. Thank you very much. You can see this on YouTube later on. Thank you. Goodbye.